All right, let's get into it. Today, we're digging into the massive economic forces that really drove America's westward expansion between 1877 and 1898. We're going to go way beyond those romantic myths of the lone cowboy, you know? We're going to look at the huge engines of industry and government that were actually pulling the strings. And that brings us to the real puzzle of this whole era. It's a total paradox, right? All this growth, all this success, somehow ended up creating incredible hardship and struggle for so many of the people on the ground, especially the farmers. So, how on earth did that happen? Well, let's find out. You see, the push west wasn't some slow, gradual migration. It was more like an explosion, and it was fueled by three main things: absolutely game-changing technology, some really aggressive government policies, and of course, the irresistible lure of gold. Okay, so first up, technology. The scale of change here was just staggering. Just look at this. Between 1870 and 1900, the amount of corn and wheat the US produced literally doubled. And this wasn't because more people were out there working. No, this was industrial power. We're talking steam tractors and mechanical reapers that let just a few people farm vast, vast amounts of land. Farming was officially becoming a big industry. And right alongside those giant machines, you had something much, much simpler, but honestly, maybe even more disruptive: barbed wire. It seems so basic today, but this cheap, easy-to-install fencing was a revolution. It let farmers protect their crops, sure, but it also completely shattered the whole open-range cattle industry, which depended on wide-open, unfenced land. This one little invention totally redrew the map of the West and basically killed the classic cowboy way of life. Then you have this second huge driver, the government. Washington wanted the West settled, and they wanted it settled fast. So, through the Pacific Railroads Acts, they gave away just unbelievable amounts of land directly to the railroad companies. Then the Homestead Act comes along, offering 160 acres of free land, a massive incentive for settlers to move. And by backing the telegraph, they plugged a farmer in the middle of Kansas directly into the grain prices in London, making huge commercial farming possible for the first time. And finally, of course, you had the lure of instant riches. 100,000. Just think about that number. That's how many people poured into the Pikes Peak area after gold was discovered in 1869. And a rush like that was only possible because railroads could get people there and the telegraph spread the news like wildfire. These rushes created these wild, chaotic boom towns like Deadwood and Denver, which, eventually became the cities we know today. Okay, so we've got this picture of super fast industrial level expansion. But here's where that twist we talked about comes in, the paradox. For the small farmers at the heart of all this, all that success, all that incredible production, was somehow leading them straight to financial ruin. It's what's known as the trap of overproduction. And it's a brutal one. Because everyone was using this new technology to produce so much more grain, the world market was completely flooded. Supply just skyrocketed past demand, and so prices crashed. A farmer could literally grow twice as much wheat as he did the year before, but the money he actually made at the end of the day could be even less. It was just soul-crushing. And these farmers were caught in a terrible economic vice. On one side, they had to sell their crops for rock-bottom prices because of that global oversupply. But on the other side, they had to buy all their manufactured goods at super high prices set by powerful monopolies. And to top it all off, they had to pay these insanely high shipping rates to the railroad monopolies who could charge whatever they wanted. They were selling low and buying high. I mean, that's a recipe for absolute disaster. But this desperation didn't just lead to people giving up, it led to them getting organized. Facing a total economic collapse, farmers started to band together and fight back. And in the process, they created one of the biggest grassroots movements in all of American history. And this movement didn't just appear overnight, it built up over decades. It started with the Grange back in 1867, which was at first just a social club, but it quickly turned political, pushing for state laws to regulate the railroads. From there, it evolved into the Farmers' Alliances in the 1880s. These guys were more direct. They set up their own economic co-ops to try and bypass the monopolies entirely. And eventually, this whole groundswell became the Populist Party, a major national political force challenging corporate power in the 1890s. Now, it's really important to remember this wasn't just one single movement. African-American farmers were facing all the same economic pressures, plus the constant threat of intense racism. So in the 1880s, they formed the Colored Farmers Alliance, which gave them a platform to organize and fight back against that unique, dual burden they carried. And one of the biggest things the alliance went after was the crop lien system. This thing was a vicious cycle of debt, especially down in the South. If you were a sharecropper with no cash, you had to literally mortgage your next year's crop just to get credit for the seeds and tools you needed to survive the current year. It was a system basically designed to trap people in poverty, and the Alliance challenged it head-on. So let's zoom out for a second. This whole era of expansion didn't just create winners and losers economically. It permanently reshaped the entire country, its society, its environment, and its whole identity. We have this powerful myth of the American West, the lone cowboy riding on the open range, total freedom. But the reality of this period? It was completely different. It was the industrial farmer worried about global markets, a landscape sliced up by barbed wire fences, an individual freedom that was often boxed in by the immense power of corporate railroads. And the land itself, both the physical land and the human landscape, was just profoundly changed. Sure, new towns like Dodge City and Sacramento popped up along the rail lines, but this progress came at an unbelievable cost. Mining rushes led to the government breaking treaties and forcing Native American tribes off their ancestral lands. The buffalo herds were almost completely wiped out, which was absolutely catastrophic for the Plains Indian cultures who depended on them for survival. The whole ecosystem was turned upside down. But the West also represented this powerful dream of a fresh start, of escape and independence. The Exodus movement is such a powerful example of this. After Reconstruction collapsed in the South, thousands of African Americans moved west to get away from Jim Crow oppression. They founded their own towns like Nicodemus, Kansas, a real symbol of the powerful drive for Black self-determination and owning your own land. And the story of Chinese immigrants shows yet another side of this really complex reality. They were absolutely essential laborers. They built the railroads, they worked the mines, but they faced terrible hostility, which all came to a head with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, a law that just slammed the door on new immigration from China. And yet, pushed out of so many jobs, they showed this incredible resilience, creating their own economic spaces like laundries and building these thriving communities in Chinatown. So, as we start to wrap this all up, what's the big takeaway here? Well, this period really set up a fundamental conflict in American life, a debate that, honestly, is still going on today. At its heart, the central tension of the era was this clash between concentrated corporate power, power that was often created by the government's own handouts, and the organized grassroots resistance from everyday people just demanding a fair shot. That dynamic, that struggle, really set the stage for generations of political fights to come. Which leaves us with one last big question to think about. The government subsidized the railroads, which in turn created these enormous private fortunes and incredible corporate power. So how did that early dynamic, where public money created private power that then arguably worked against the public good, how did that shape America's ongoing argument over the right balance between corporations and the rights of the individual, the worker, the farmer, the citizen? It's definitely something to think about,